Chapter 15. The tag end of winter is a dull time for actors in New York. The plays have opened for the season, and those few that remain to open have already been cast. It is too early for summer stock, and all that is left is television and radio. Greg Adams was among the fairly lucky ones. She found enough work to keep alive, and although none of it brought her to the attention of the public, it still kept her from having to get a job as a waitress or a filing clerk, as many of her friends had to do. She played one of a group of teenagers in a filmed television commercial, and every time it was put on the air, she received a check. She had 2 small parts in an early morning radio serial. These paid for her rent and her large monthly telephone bill, and since she had never particularly cared about eating, and David Wilder Savage took her to dinner 4 or 5 times a week, she managed to get along quite well. During the day, she made the rounds or slept, and on the evenings when she was forced to be alone, she would go to Downey's in the theater district, or to Maxie's bar near the Winter Garden, and look for people she knew so that she could sit with them, drink coffee, and spend the rest of the early morning hours peering around looking for David Wilder Savage. Occasionally, she would see him come into the place with other people, and she would sense a strange, sickening tingling of her nerve ends and would hardly be able to breathe. The conversation of the young actors in her booth would fade away as if she were falling asleep, and she would get up and walk past the booth where David Wilder Savage was sitting so that he would notice her. Then he would look pleased and surprised and ask her to join him. It never seemed to occur to him how planned these chance encounters had been, or if he knew, he gave no indication. She had known him for such a long time now, and yet she could not quite figure him out. She was convinced that he loved her. And still, they had reached a plateau on which she suffered, and he seemed quite content. What could she do to break through? She remembered a Chinese proverb she had read. It takes 6 years to make a friend, and 6 minutes to lose one. Perhaps this was too cynical. But why hadn't anyone, even the Chinese in their ancient wisdom, made up a proverb to tell how to turn a friendly lover into one who couldn't live without you? Every month, when she discovered she was not caught, she would give up a little prayer of thanksgiving, and then, because she knew she was quite safe again, she would allow herself to feel the pang of disappointment that was at the back of her mind. Perhaps something drastic would make David take action, something demanding immediate decision, something which would make him take stock of how valuable she was to him. But she knew that a girl had to take care of herself, so she kept on taking precautions not to conceive, not to change the status quo, not to change the even nature of their relationship, when all the while she was alternately boiling and shivering inside with the force of her emotions. She was making curtains for David Wilder Savage's kitchen at last. Although she hardly knew how to sew, and certainly had never cared about putting up a stepped-in hem when a tiny safety pin could do, Greg was painstakingly hemming curtains in an expensive fabric that could have sent her on her rounds in taxis for a week. Whoever made their own kitchen curtains nowadays? But there was something symbolic about the act. Something that broke through the veneer of Broadway and cocktail parties and bright quips and might even break through the veneer of the man she was desperate to marry. It was so old-fashioned, so out of place with them and their friends. She had the curtains finished on a day in March, just before his play was due to open out of town. She decided to wait and save them for a surprise after he had the suspense of the opening and the reviews and the possible revisions out of the way. When he invited her to go with him to Boston for the opening, after warning her that he would hardly be able to pay any attention to her if she did come with him, she packed her best cocktail dress for the festivities, a pair of slacks for lounging in the front row of the theater during last-minute rehearsals, and put the kitchen curtains in the bottom of her suitcase. It made her feel good just to look at them, as if she really were married to him and had to do domestic things. It was a laugh, really, to look at her own unkempt apartment and then think of all the wifely chores she was anxious to do for his. But Greg didn't care about her apartment. It was a place to sleep and change her clothes and take phone calls. That was all. They arrived in Boston in cold, sleety weather. There was ice packed hard on the paths in the common, and the sky was as gray as twilight, even at noon. Greg had never been in Boston before, and the city came to her in a series of impressions. The view of a statue from the window of her hotel room, the inside of the theater, just like the inside of any theater, the spires of a subway kiosk, a pair of extraordinarily ugly green suede shoes in a store window, which she passed every day on her way from the hotel to the theater. But most of all, Boston was a time of painful shock, of picking up the morning papers and reading reviews that made her suddenly feel as if she were not in any land she knew, but had been dropped down in the country of the Hottentots. The reviews were condescending. There was no praise for the leading lady, but pity that she had to suffer so. It was so incredible that were it not for the name of the play and the names of the members of the cast and the producer, Greg would have thought it was a review of some other play entirely. And yet, at the back of her mind, she had to admit that she had never really liked the script, but had thought that if David Wilder Savage had chosen it to produce, it must have some theatrical merit that was way above her head. Except for Gordon MacKay's play, it was his first failure. Greg hated her friends in New York already for what they might say, what they might imply. If Tony dared to smirk in front of her and repeat what he had told her months ago, she would slap him in the face. It was simply that everyone had a right to make a mistake, and in David Wilder Savage's case, the wonder was that the mistake had been so long overdue. The play closed temporarily in Boston. There was no reason to try it in New York. The morning the reviews had come out, David had put on his coat, left the hotel, and not returned for 8 hours. Greg did not know what to do. She had visions of his tall form striding through the gray mists of Boston like an avenging ghost. She pictured him getting drunk in a bar and falling under the wheels of a trolley and being killed. She did not know whether to stay in her hotel room next to the phone or wander from bar to bar in search of him. Every minute seemed like 10. An hour was unspeakable. She finally left a note in the room and a message at the desk and went out into the freezing day. The sleet had turned to drizzle. It was vaguely refreshing against her face, and the cold that hurt her fingertips gave her something to think about. She must have walked for miles, peering into the early gloom, not knowing where to go, but not being able to bear staying still. She pictured him walking toward her, and herself falling into his arms with an hysterical cry of relief. It was not so much that she was afraid of what would happen to him, because she knew he was moody but not reckless, but the terror that overtook her without him. She hated Boston as she had hated no other city before. Finally, she went to the empty theater and entered through the stage door. It seemed to be her destiny that she would find him there, and she wondered why she had not thought of it before. He would be sitting alone in the very center of the orchestra, lost in thought, his long legs doubled up against the back of the seat in front of him, his neck resting on the back of his. But the theater was totally empty, dark and silent, and smelling of dry old upholstery. She knew then at last, because she had been so sure he would be there and he was not, that it was useless to try to estimate his thoughts. He was too separate from her. His life was a world of his own. And at that moment, every importance her own life and privacy had had for her vanished completely. When she came back to the hotel, exhausted, he was there, in the brightly lighted drugstore talking to the director, looking not appreciably changed. She ran over to him, squeezed herself into the booth beside him, and gasped, "Where were you?" He looked down at her with a slight appearance of annoyance. "Do you want some coffee?" he asked kindly, although he was interrupting a sentence to ask it. "Where were you? Where were you?" "Ivan and I have been sitting here talking for the last hour. You'll have to be quiet and listen if you're going to stay." Greg wiped bits of ice off her hair with her hands and leaned forward to peer at him to see if his eyes were bloodshot or if he had changed in any way at all. "She's all wet," Ivan said. "She looks like Little Nell." He was a large, ruddy-faced man with a high voice for someone of his size. "You'd better have some coffee," David said, warming her hands in his own. He glanced at her curiously because she seemed so obviously frantic and bedraggled, but he did not ask her what the matter was, and he gestured to the waitress to bring more hot coffee. "We're discussing whether or not we can salvage our poor murdered play," Ivan said. He had several sheets of paper in front of him on the table, covered with tiny handwriting. Greg looked at him. He was friendly, he was kind, and she wanted him to leave so desperately that she almost thought the force of the wish alone would spirit him away. She turned to David, clutching his warm hands in her cold ones. "Are you all right?" "Yes." "I didn't know what happened to you. Why didn't you tell me where you were going?" "Drink your coffee," he said pleasantly. He brought over the shaker of sugar from the edge of the table and set it next to her cup. "We can talk later, after this business." Greg drank her coffee, listening to the voices of the two men and hardly hearing them. He knew how much he meant to her. He had invited her to come all the way to Boston with him, and then when he needed her, he had run away. Why hadn't he turned to her for comfort? Why hadn't he said something? And here he was, face calm again, trying to save a play that was obviously not worth saving, and leaving her out of it completely. He had asked her for neither comfort nor encouragement. He had simply ignored her. Why had he asked her to come with him if he intended to ignore her? She wasn't his friend only when things were going well. In fact, she would be thankful for a chance to show him how stalwart she could be when things were going badly. Perhaps that would be the chance she had been waiting for, to comfort him when he was in need, and no longer the strong one. Ivan was standing up now, smiling at her. "So long," he said. "See you on the train." "Goodbye." She was so glad to see him go that she could even be cordial. As soon as he had left, she turned to David. "Are you going to try the play again?" "Weren't you listening?" he asked, rather surprised. "Of course," she lied. She looked down at her hands. They were warm now and looked red. "You know I would do anything for you. That's what I'm here for. You don't seem to realize that." He smoothed her hair gently. "I know." "I want to help you," she said. "You do?" "I wonder." He stood up and put some money on the table. "We have to go and pack now. We're leaving on the 5 o'clock train. I have to see someone first, and then I'll meet you upstairs." "Please let me go with you," Greg said. "I'll only be gone for half an hour. Will you do me a favor and pack for me?" "Please let me go with you. I missed you when you were gone." "There's no reason for you to tag along," he said, still pleasantly and gently, as if he were talking to a 5-year-old child. "I'll be right back." "Who are you going to see?" He suddenly looked very tired, as if the toll of staying up all night had finally caught up with him. "All right," he said quietly. "I'm not going to see anyone. I'm just going to walk around the block. You know what last night and this morning meant to me. I want to walk around the block and think about what I'm going to do." Greg took his hand. "I'll walk with you, and I won't say a word." He loosened his hand from her grasp. "You said you wanted to help me." "I do." "Then let me be by myself for a while. Sometimes the greatest favor you can do for someone is to let him be alone." "Come right back," Greg said, her voice shaking a little, trying to sound cheerful. He ruffled her hair, the way he had when he had first made love to her and had left her to talk on the telephone, and walked out of the drugstore. The affectionate gesture melted her completely. She knew he could not possibly be angry at her, and she knew also that she could not bear to sit alone in the hotel room even for half an hour, remembering that gesture and feeling the strange walls closing in about her. She snatched her purse and hurried out of the drugstore after him, not even bothering to button up her coat. She saw him at the end of the block, walking quickly, his hands in his coat pockets, his collar turned up. She scurried down the street, hiding behind a parked car when he turned the corner so he would not see her. He did not seem to have any definite direction. He was simply walking. The odd, crazy thought hit her then that perhaps, after all, he was going to meet someone, and he was a little early. Oh, God, Greg thought. Oh, God. Just the sight of David ahead of her reassured her. She felt that as long as she could keep him before her eyes, everything would be all right. She was being careful that he would not notice her following him, but she half hoped that he would turn around and see her and let her walk with him at last. He went into the common and began to walk more slowly, strolling down the ice-bordered path. The park was deserted. It was a very cold afternoon. The trees looked like thin black lines against the gray sky and the brownish buildings beyond. Rows of trees, rows of houses, all strange to her and of no importance, as if they hardly existed. The only thing in the world was this man she was following secretly, keeping him always in sight because he meant warmth and life and cheerfulness, even in this bleak, empty landscape of the park. She followed him not for half an hour, but an hour. She was getting numb with the cold, and she was afraid they would miss their train. Finally, David headed back for their hotel, and a moment after he entered the lobby, Greg darted in after him. She waited until the elevator he was in had gone upstairs, and then she went to it and rang the bell. He was in his room, which adjoined hers, packing his suitcase. "Hi," Greg said. He didn't answer. He was folding his dressing gown and doing it badly. She went to him and took the dressing gown out of his hands. "Let me do that." "We missed the train," he said. "We'll take the 6 o'clock. "I know. What took you so long?" He turned and looked at her. She had never seen his face so withdrawn. "I was waiting for you to get tired of following me and give up." What could she say? Bravado was the only answer. "How did you know?" Greg asked with a nervous little smile. "I turned around at least twice and saw you. You don't make a very good detective." The words were pleasant enough, but the tone was distant and strained. "I didn't bother you," she said. "You bothered the hell out of me." "Why? Why?" "Look," he said. He sighed. "If I want to be alone, and I ask you to let me be alone, can't you respect my wishes? I would let you be alone instantly if you requested it. But I'd never request it. I hate to be alone." "Does everyone have to be exactly like you?" he asked quietly. "Of course not. But I just want to be with you." "You're always with me. You'll be with me for 5 hours on the train. Do you think you can make it into your room all by yourself to gather up your things, or do I have to come in and hold your hand?" "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't know I would upset you." "You do know," he said, "because I tell you. But you don't seem to care. If you were playing a part in a play, do you think I would stand in the wings during the whole performance, blowing kisses and whispering and throwing folded-up notes at you? Don't be sarcastic." "I will explain it to you just once more," he said, speaking very slowly, as if he were really too tired to make the effort. "There are times when a person wants to be alone, to think, or just not to think at all. Perhaps I'm worse than other people, perhaps I need to be alone more often. But if this is the case, it's the way I am, and I want you to try to understand it. If you can't, then I don't think you and I should see each other anymore." His words were like a knife stripping off her skin, sure and cold and terrifying. "No," Greg said. "No. We have to see each other." He sat down on the edge of the bed, right on the tangle of unpacked clothing. "I'm so tired," he said. Greg crossed the room to him in an instant, and sat down beside him, putting her arms around his neck. "We have to see each other," she said. "We have to. I'll leave you alone. I promise." He did not push her away or draw away at all. He simply sat there, allowing her to cling to him, his eyes shut. Finally, he spoke, quietly, in a nearly expressionless voice. "Start now," he said. On the train, all the way from Boston to New York, David Wilder Savage slept, his head back against the back of his seat, his face grayish with strain and fatigue. Greg tried to rest, but couldn't. She was so tired that she felt as if any little thing would make her crack wide open like Humpty Dumpty falling off the wall, and nothing could put her together again, not even 12 hours of sleep, with a sleeping pill. How long ago the beginning of their relationship seemed, as if it had happened to two other people. Every day now, things were more unbearable. It was a marriage after the honeymoon was over, but with nothing to replace the lost romance. In the beginning, newness had made her casual and wary, so that she had kept her sense of humor and had managed to amuse him even when she was more concerned than he ever suspected. But now, every little word, every look or movement, cut into the festering wound of panic that she kept inside her heart. Even her actions of the summer, her casual and loving goodbyes when she drove back to the country for summer stock, seemed to be the motions of a happy stranger. The worst of it was that there was neither a going back nor a reformation possible. She was what she was, and she had made of their relationship the tense and teetering thing it was. She knew it, and she was powerless to do anything about it. So everything she said was wrong, and everything she did was wrong, and with every mistake her need of his forgiveness grew, until Greg felt as if she were living in a nightmare. This was not she, nor was it David. It was a hoax, a horrible trick of fate. All she wanted was to love and be loved in return. It was cruel. Walking up the ramp in the cold of Grand Central Station, Greg felt more reassured. They were going home, and things would be better. They talked casually. They smiled at each other, and after they had deposited their suitcases at his apartment, he took her to a small restaurant for dinner. It was an inexpensive cellar place, frequented mostly by Ivy League college students and their dates, with red-checked tablecloths and the kind of food that gives you heartburn before you are even finished eating it. There was no liquor, only wine and beer. It was a place where no one would recognize David Wilder Savage and ask him how the play had gone, or worse, how it had gone, and try to offer sympathy, real or false. It was 11 o'clock at night, and they were the only two people in the restaurant, except for their gnome-like waiter, who popped in and out of the kitchen carrying their plates and chewing surreptitiously. "I'm glad to be back in New York," Greg said. "So am I. We ought to send out for a bottle. Do you think they have a little courier who runs across the street and brings back something alcoholic?" "That waiter is trying to eat his dinner and go home," David said. "We can have a drink at my place." "Let's hope he's not eating ours." David smiled. They were together again. They were two in a close little group observing and commenting on the world. Not important comments, or even very witty ones at this moment, but vital because they were a bond. "If he is," Greg went on, "I wish he would look a little less disgusted. What time is it?" 5 minutes to 12. Greg put her napkin under her coffee cup, where some coffee had spilled onto the saucer. "I wish people could always be sure of each other, do you know what I mean? Never have to guess what the other one is thinking or going to do. I hope all that midnight philosophy didn't come from your uneasiness about your spaghetti," David said lightly. "You must be tired." "I don't mean other people," Greg said. "I mean us." "That would be boring, wouldn't it? Not to me." "No," he said thoughtfully. "Not to you." "What does that mean?" "I'm just repeating what you said." "The most important thing in the world is communication," Greg said desperately. That's why people can talk, so they can comfort one another and amuse one another and cry out for help. And tell one another dull stories and sell one another the Brooklyn Bridge, David said, smiling. You left out a lot more. Well, we'll have to ignore those because I'm talking about something else. All right, why don't you ever say that you love me? It was out now, the accusation, the all-consuming question. They looked at each other across the table for a moment in silence, Greg tense and frightened and rebellious and relieved all at once, and he rather sad. Because it's not the answer to the question you're asking, he said. What do you mean? The college girl in the parked car asks, do you love me? And the boy with her says yes. But what she means is, will you respect me? And what he means is, I want to sleep with you. The child asks his mother if she loves him, and what he means is, will you protect me? Do you approve of me? You ask me if I love you, and what you really mean is, will I devour you, envelope you, obliterate life for you, and, worse, will I allow you to do that to me? That's why I never answer you, because I do love you, but not in the way you want, and I never will. Greg stared at him for a moment, shocked. Everything he had just said traveled downward through her mind, like a paper piano roll, and stopped at the line next to the end. You do love me, she whispered. You do. Did you listen to the rest? You said you loved me. He sighed and shook his head. God help me, I must love you, he said. She stood up and ran to him and kissed him, right in the restaurant, her arms wound around his neck, tears in her eyes. That's the curtain line, she said. And the orchestra starts to play, and the audience rise to their feet as if they were pulled by strings, and it's a rouser. And then they leave, he said, and they go to Nedick's. He stood up, unwound her arms from his neck, and put her coat tenderly about her shoulders. Oh, why are you so cynical? Greg asked, hugging his arm, her head on his shoulder. Her head just reached his shoulder. Her blonde hair hung down over his lapel. As they walked out of the restaurant that way, they passed an old-fashioned pier glass hung against the wall next to the check room. Greg stopped walking. Look at us. You look like a mermaid clutching a drowning sailor, David Wilder Savage said. When they entered his apartment, he put a record on the phonograph immediately, as he always did, and lighted the fire in the fireplace. Greg tossed her coat over a chair and slipped out of her shoes. In her stockinged feet, she padded over to the couch and sat down, her knees drawn up to her chin, her arms clutched around her knees, her eyes moving as she watched his every move. I have a present for you, she said dreamily. I'll give it to you later. Really? He looked amused. Not what you think. A real present. A thing. Well, you'd better give it to me soon because I'm dead tired and I'm going to put you in a cab and go to bed. Her mood was shattered. She felt herself beginning to tremble. It's my present and I'll give it to you when I feel like it, she said, hurt. I'm sorry, darling. I'd love to have it. Where is it? When you get a present from somebody, you don't just throw him out afterward, she said. Then give it to me tomorrow when neither of us is so tired, he said. Don't you want it? Not if it's going to make you upset. If I want to give you a present, you have to take it, she said, whether you want to or not. Then give me the goddamn thing. Don't you love me? Her voice was the voice of a small girl. She heard it in the still room as if it belonged to someone else, and that made it even more frightening to have to wait for the answer, because the answer would belong to her and not to someone else. What the hell has a goddamned present to do with whether I love you or not? It has everything to do with it. Greg, he said, I am not going to humor you tonight. What has loving me got to do with humoring me? He closed his eyes. I'm so tired, he said. Do you love me? Yes. Then why can't I stay all night? Stay all night. Stay all night. Why didn't you ever let me stay all night before? I think there's a clean toothbrush in the medicine chest, he said. Top shelf. I know, Greg said. There's a white nightgown in the bottom drawer of the dresser, he went on. But I suppose you know that too. No, there isn't. I never saw. She stopped when she saw the way he was looking at her. Well, you can wear my pajama top if you like to wear something in bed in the wintertime, he said. I don't. Oh, there are so many little things we don't know about each other. It hurts me just to think about all the little things we've missed. She put her arms around him. Why didn't you ever let me stay all night before? You stayed for 3 days this summer. That wasn't like staying all night, it was like coming for a visit. Oh, there's a difference, is there? Why are you so sadistic? You stayed other nights too, as I remember. You stayed during the summer whenever you drove down from your job. I should hope so, Greg said angrily, after driving all that way. Oh my God, he said. What is the difference? Stay all night. Don't stay all night, just don't analyze it. I have to, she said. You're very strange. Yes, he said. I am. She stared at him for a moment, partly in anger and partly in fright. She remembered what Tony had said so long ago about David Wilder Savage and Gordon MacKay. No one knows for sure whether or not they were in love with each other. And he seemed so afraid to love her. Strange. Strange. Perhaps he was strange, but not in that way. If it were true, she wouldn't be afraid to face it because she was sophisticated enough. And goodness knows she had met enough men who turned out to be different than she had thought. But she knew it wasn't true about David Wilder Savage, not that. She would have heard rumors from other people besides Tony, because everyone seemed to know every shameful thing about a celebrity. And David Wilder Savage was a celebrity in their group of people who lived for the theater. Well, don't gloat about it, she said coldly. I am strange, he went on, to put up with what you do to me. You cling, you choke me, you demand, you don't try to understand. You never think, am I unhappy? It's only, are you unhappy? You follow me, you go through my bureau drawers, you're jealous of my friends. You lie in wait for me in bars. Oh, don't think I didn't know that too. Just because I always ask you to come and sit with me doesn't mean I don't know why you're there. I have a right to be there. Yes. Then why are you angry? Greg cried. I thought you loved me. I'm not angry, he said quietly. I'm sorry for you. Why? Because you need someone who will love you for these things and be warmed by them, not someone who finds them harder and harder to forgive. The pain that settled in her chest was worse than any she had felt when she was alone. This was not a mere 10 pounds, but 50. When she answered, she spoke through the pain, and only made the effort because not to speak would have hurt her more. You have to forgive me for loving you? The love you have to give isn't the kind of love I need, he said. He smiled and touched her cheek with his fingertips. We're two slightly neurotic people whose neuroses don't happen to complement each other. Come on, let's go to sleep. Things will look a lot better in the morning. Sleep? Do you think I could ever sleep now? I'll give you some warm milk and a sleeping pill. How's that? And I'll take one too. We'll be unconscious together. We're never together, she said. She put her hands over her face, shoulders tensed, waiting for him to come over to comfort her. He didn't. She heard him walk out of the room and looked up in a panic, but a moment later he returned, carrying a small medicine bottle which he set on the coffee table. What kind of love do you need? Greg asked. He was still smiling. A gentle love, like in the song. No, seriously. I am serious. What in the world was a gentle love? Greg had a mental image of a little mouse of a girl with wispy hair and no face, who would be content to spend her life on the periphery of David Wilder Savage's life, admiring him, waiting for him to notice her. The kind of girl that girls like Greg were always sorry for. And yet, she would be the luckiest girl in the world because David Wilder Savage would cherish her, and he would care what happened to her no matter where he was. "I'll heat the milk," he said. He walked into the kitchen, the curtainless kitchen. Should she give him the curtains now? That would show him she was a gentle girl, the kind who sat at home night after night and hemmed those goddamn things. Greg jumped to her feet and ran to her suitcase, spilling her clothes and shoes onto the floor in her hurry to get the curtains out from underneath. She walked into the kitchen with the curtains held behind her back. He had put 2 heavy porcelain mugs on the drain board, and a pot of milk was heating on top of the stove. She was holding the curtains out in front of her, and he was looking at them with a pleased and slightly perplexed expression. "Let's put them up now," Greg said. "Curtains?" "Yes." "Well, they're lovely, darling." "I made them." "Did you?" And suddenly, she realized that he would have been just as pleased if she had given him a new record or a bottle of wine. The curtains had absolutely no extra symbolism to him, none at all, and they could not change her or what she meant to him any more than the fact that a monkey is taught to eat from a spoon can turn him into a baby. She folded the curtains carefully and put them on the kitchen table. "We'll hang them up tomorrow," she said, keeping her voice steady and giving him a stiff smile. "It was sweet of you, darling, to go to all that trouble." "You don't know the half of how homey I am," she said lightly. She fled into the living room. The light of the fire was hot on her face. She felt it burning her eyelids. The little bottle of sleeping pills was ruddy in the firelight, its edge red. She could take them all, eat them up like aspirin, and curl up on this couch for good before he had even finished warming the milk. He would think she was asleep, and he would not want to disturb her. He would put her mug of milk down quietly on the coffee table and bend to pick up the bottle of sleeping pills. Then he would notice for the first time that it was empty. He would be concerned, upset. He would shake her and call the hospital. All the way to the hospital in the ambulance, he would sit beside her as she had seen bereaved relatives sitting beside the sheet-covered hump in many an ambulance that shrieked past her in the street. He would be wondering what would happen if he lost her. He would know why she wanted to kill herself. She would never have to tell him how unhappy she was again. There was a click as he set the mugs on the coffee table. "We can sleep all day," he said. It had been just a wild fantasy, the suicide. She knew she would never do it. People who really meant to kill themselves shot themselves through the head or jumped in front of trains. They did not take pills when they knew there was someone near at hand to make sure it was not too late. This pill bit was a woman's trick, a device of the lovelorn. It didn't take courage. Courage was to live. Greg had the oddest feeling, as if someone had given her her life back again. It wasn't worth much, but it was her own life. If she wasn't going to die, at least she was going to live as she pleased, whatever that meant. She wondered whether she had ever done anything because she really wanted to, or only because she had to, like the suicide drawn irresistibly down the platform toward the train.